Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Social Liability Podcast with your host, Raz and Buck. Some of you may have listened to the pilot, and it was a little chaotic, but we appreciate all the feedback that you gave us. But this is going to be episode 1, the official episode 1, with our topic of the week being horrible bosses. Buck, have you had some horrible bosses?
I would have to say yes. Yes, I have had some really, really terrible bosses.
I mean, you and I have had one job together, and we had some a healthy rotation of horrible bosses. But we've definitely had other jobs other than with each other. And uh, just for the full disclosure, and whoever might be listening to this podcast, I will not, and I repeat, I will not be talking about any employers I currently have. And when we talk about Buck's employers, that's probably his wife. So we just won't talk about her either.
Correct. Definitely don't want to do that.
So,
No, no, no.
what is the worst boss you think you've ever had?
I would have to say that the worst boss I ever had was the deputy warden of the prison when we got hired there. You
Really?
and I both. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
you've spent some time in some real shitholes. I mean, let's just face reality here. And I'm sure that during the course of our conversations as the weeks unfold, people are going to become more and more acquainted with the originality that is your life. But you really think the deputy warden, and it was the deputy warden of security, I might add, that was operating the prison that you and I worked in, that was the most horrible boss you've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, and for the simple fact, he was a hell of a nice guy. He really, really was. But he did get me fired for one night, and that scared the crap out of me. And that's probably the worst experience I've ever had on the job. I literally got back from my honeymoon when I got married to my ex-wife, and
Well, let me rephrase.
and
She wasn't your
and
ex-wife at the time. She was your wife. Then now is your ex-wife.
correct, yeah, exactly. I married this woman who was my coworker, and dotted all my I's, crossed all my T's, and when I came back from my honeymoon, I found out that I really didn't actually have a job anymore because I violated policy about nepotism, and I was assured prior to actually tying the knot that this was all going to be okay, and it wasn't. And so I would have to say, returning from my honeymoon to find out that I might actually be jobless kind of qualifies somebody to be the worst boss I've ever had.
Yeah. Now you may have just heard a censor bar there that I did bleep out the the actual employer because we're not going to get too identifiable here. But yeah, you and I were both work there, and you had started like 6 months before I did, and I was there probably oh, I don't know, 2 weeks, and then your soon-to-be wife got hired. I think she was like 2 weeks behind me, and
Exactly 2 weeks behind you. That is correct. Yeah.
and how long was it before you two got married? How long was that?
Let's see here. I'd say about from July to January, probably about 8 months.
Holy crap, you move fast. You're an idiot.
Some would definitely agree with you on that one.
Well, if those of you that are listening to this are in our social circle, you know the general rule is now that if you're going to be in any kind of committed relationship, you must be vetted by my wife and I. Uh, so, yeah, that definitely became the case with Mark as well. So,
Yeah.
um, with the whole thing, I know for a fact what happened, and you can. It's your story, so you tell it. But you two were working on separate shifts. Neither one of you was a supervisor. You were both the same rank,
Hmm.
and by becoming betrothed, you both would at that point forgo any promotions, and that was accepted. And then after the deed was done, so to say, uh, they just arbitrarily decided to fire you instead of her, even though you were the senior person. So
That's the only thing that saved me, yep, was the fact that they violated their own policy and fired me even though I was senior.
yeah, I mean, other than the fact that he just fired you and was a douche canoe about it, I mean, does that really, make him the most horrible boss out there? Because everyone's been, had a boss that's let them go for, or, got them in trouble for something stupid. But don't you think that a horrible boss would be somebody who's more of a douche canoe on a consistent basis?
Well, I mean, I just haven't. I gotta say, I'm very blessed in the fact that I really haven't noticed anybody being that big of a bastard to me on the job while I worked for them. Um, you know, that's essentially what it boils down to. That he would that individual qualifies as my worst boss because not only did he outright fabricate the fact that he had everything taken care of, which he very well did not. Um, he had no problem skirting all of the blame to anybody else and really just insulting my intelligence. It got to the point where I didn't even talk to the man.
Well,
Um,
I think skirting responsibility and trying to put off on others is like the hallmark of career in corrections for the most part.
it really is. It really is. But that almost cost me my entire life. I mean, I've actually never been fired from a job with the exception of my very last employment, and that was because, my disability was getting worse and I was slipping. Like
Well,
my
you've
at
been
that
fired
point,
from two. You've been fired from two because let's face reality. No matter how much you try to sugarcoat it and say it was voluntary, they did fire you from the prison for contracting MS. Let's be completely honest here.
I really can't dispute that either. I just I kind of don't count that because the writing was on the wall and I just tried to get ahead of the eight ball on that one. But yeah, yeah, I guess you could really say I was fired from two jobs. But either way, it's I worked there for 7 years and in corrections, and I can't skip over the fact that somebody just told me that everything was going to be fine, and I planned my life around that. I really did, and it really almost blew up in my face, and that was not okay. I mean, I just got back from my honeymoon and found out that I didn't have a job. I mean, like that is not a welcome thing to come back to. So
Yeah, see, like I was okay on the prison side. Then when I left the prison, I went to a different agency, a different law enforcement agency, and I worked there for about a little over 2 years. And I think that is where my most horrible boss was. So we're both sticking to the law enforcement side on this, but in that scenario, you and I still work together. But this individual, they had a concept where they were going to be an independent department. Ended up because of union negotiations with another agency, we got merged because me and my partner were making, who were the only two uh, agents in the agency, were making more money than the entire other agency, which had over 100. So they by bringing us into their fold and putting us in their union, they all got pay raises, and then they my version of your horrible boss story decided they were going to get rid of my partner and I, and because we had not attended the same academy as everybody else, we'd attended one through the Department of Corrections, and they decided, oh, we'll just try to push them out by making it difficult. Well, like my partner, for example, who has an exemplary record, and you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to dox them out here on the podcast at all. But the person had zero uh, ideations towards misconduct or impropriety. He had a personality of a snapping turtle, but he he was not dirty by any stretch. And they ended up getting rid of him for failure to meet expectations. Um, and then when they terminated me, they said it was because I incurred cost to the agency because I got two flat tires. And their whole concept was, well, the vehicle was taken out of service and he took the vehicle anyway. Well, guess what? When we went to court, because we did go to court over that, uh, and they were asked on on examination who was the vehicle manager And what is the vehicle manager is the one that took it out of service, correct? Yeah, who is the vehicle manager? Oh, I was the fleet manager. They completely
Yeah.
forgot that I was the fleet. They went all the way to court without realizing that I was the fleet manager, and I never took that vehicle out of service. So I ended up getting the court hearing ended favorably in my way. So we'll just leave it at that. But that person was a freaking snake, and I have seen them subsequently on the street before I moved across the country, and the only thing I could think to myself was, wow, I pulled your kids out of a mangled vehicle accident, and then drove you and your children to the hospital because it was faster than the ambulance. And this is the repayment I get. Okay, you're just gonna make crap up and lie. But I've had a lot of just shitty bosses in my lifetime, and we all have. And what do you think makes for a shitty boss in general?
That, in general, I would have to say that looking at somebody who works for you and that you are charged with supervising in any kind of capacity, and then just outright lying to them, you know, trying to bolster their attitudes and expectations of their own job in order to make your own day go smoother, that makes you a shitty boss. Um, there's a lot to be said about the fact that being a supervisor just isn't easy. And that is true, but it doesn't require lying and deceiving those that you are in charge of in order to make your own day easier. You have to roll up your sleeves and go to work, and a shitty boss just, they like to delegate. They like to sit in that chair. They like to watch the world work as if they are a puppet master, and all of their employees are their own strings, kind of like a marionette show. And I don't like that at all. That to me is just a despicable and deplorable boss.
See, there's a phrase that gets thrown out quite a bit that I would never ask you to do something I would never do myself. Well, that's not true.
Uh,
I know a gentleman who is in charge of utility crews for the water departments, for like sewers and stuff like that. And he's very good at what he does. But I told him, it's like, I could do your job, but there is no way in hell you're going to get me to be, waist deep in human feces. There's no way. um,
right.
so it's not going to make you likable, but you could do it. Now, I think what the biggest thing that, and this is an undeniable quality in somebody who's horrible at their job as a supervisor, is typically that person, it's the first time they've ever been in charge of something in their entire life. The first taste of responsibility as a supervisor or a boss, as we're saying in this case, I think is the undeniable, this is the most hated person you're ever going to encounter, especially when somebody who has never had a taste of authority in their life, and they like to make sure everyone knows that, hey, I have authority now and you're going to listen to me. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. It's they are now having a power trip. And I think that is the biggest thing that anybody's ever going to complain about. If they're going to complain about their boss, is the fact that the person is going to have some kind of inferiority complex.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that. Um, I can go through the few jobs that I had after I left prison. Um, like when I worked for that insurance company, you actually met my boss, and he was a good smarmy man.
Is that the man I introduced to my box of guns?
Yes, yes, it is, and that was just epic and hilarious because I don't think they, you know, I left that prison, and I had no other job experience in the world. And I managed to get an insurance company to hire me to be a financial advisor. And I think that my boss didn't believe the caliber of people that I would be introducing him to because my whole social circle revolved around corrections. Yeah, and and you were just the icing on the cake with that box of guns. It was great.
To be fair, I did not want to meet the individual, and I had told you that ahead of time.
Yes, you did.
And I did not orchestrate that. That was literally a gift that was given to me by my grandmother. She sent me a box for Christmas of old World War II revolvers and stuff that she had gotten working in a gun shop just after the war. And she'd saved them. And she just literally sent me a box of guns. And it was sitting on the coffee table when you and this individual showed up. And I don't know why, but these rusted antiques, he looked like he was terrified of them.
I think I honestly I I can't say what he looked like. I was just trying to get him in and out of your home as quick as I could because he had to go with me. And because I was still a relatively new financial advisor and I had to have a manager with me present anytime I finished business. And I just
Let's
got
talk
done.
reality. The only reason that's a thing is so he could get a cut of your freaking commission.
Well, you know what? He wouldn't have actually needed to come with me to do that because every other piece of business I ever wrote, he actually got a cut of.
Sounds like a
It,
pyramid scheme to me.
it really does, but they're $1 trillion company and they're still doing business and they've been doing it for 100 and couple years and whatever. I mean, truth be told, that was actually a pretty good job. He was only my immediate supervisor. He and I really didn't have to do very much. I was kind of under the wing of the manager of agency training, and he was a fantastic boss. I mean, that guy and I would ride around for 4.5 hours to go write a kid's life insurance policy and just watch YouTube videos the whole time. It was great, but the boss that came into your house, that was definitely a pretty big trip there.
Yeah, I did. He struck me as that kind of person who he was young enough that he probably didn't have a whole lot of experience as a supervisor or a trainer for that matter. But he just came off as trying to act superior, and I just it does not resonate with me. I
Nope.
think myself as somebody with a perfectly well tuned and intact bullshit meter, and this dude just smelled like bullshit.
Right. And you know what? There was a lot of I my mom didn't even like him for crying out loud.
And your
I mean,
mom's an old hippie.
that well, not really. My mom is really an astute person, and in her own right, she has the same kind of BS meter you do, and he was pinging all sorts of ways. That's why I started palling around and bringing my manager agency training with me because I just couldn't bring that man into people's houses of individuals I knew. They smelt right through him.
Yeah, really, it was because the guy came off as just a greasy ambulance chasing lawyer, and I think that's another a quality that people that have horrible bosses see is someone who's trying to play the part of a superior. They're trying to act
Hmm.
superior because this is what they believe that somebody should look or dress like and talk like and act like. And they're playing a character. They're not actually trying to do something for the good of the company, good of the firm, good of the collective. They are simply trying to play the character they have seen on TV's movies, or they're trying to emulate the shitty boss that they had before they came there.
I can agree with that. That is definitely a good point, and I'm gonna have to leave it there before I say something that I have to apologize for later.
Apologize
So,
to me?
no,
Oh.
just apologize in general. Yeah, who knows what'll come out of my mouth? I'm just trying to stop myself before the storm gets to coming.
So when you left that position, you went on to other things, obviously, and you took on the mantle of a boss in some ways, but not. Uh, what are some positions you've had where you've actually been in charge?
I was a business development manager for an automotive dealership, and I was in charge of not salesmen per se, but if I were the one who initiated a deal or a sale with a customer, I kind of was the overseer of it. So, in a roundabout, convoluted way, that would be like my big supervisory capacity.
Wait a minute.
And
Does that mean like when I'm trying to buy a car and the salesman goes off to talk to somebody, you were that dickhead?
nope,
Uh,
nope. I was the business development slash internet manager. I was not the sales manager. Um,
Because I'm going to tell you this right now, and normally I try not to offend people on any kind of media platform I take part in. But if you're a sales manager at a car dealership, screw you.
I I'm gonna have to go ahead and give you that one. About 70% of the time. About 70% of the time. I worked at a dealership in South Carolina, and all the sales managers there at my dealership were top of the tier aces. And you got to remember, I was a handicapped car salesman. They didn't even think I could do it. So they definitely helped me along. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have done nearly as well as I did. And I got to give them mad kudos for that. I've got no qualms with any manager I've ever had in the automotive sales industry at any dealership I've ever worked at. They all treated me fantastic, every single one of them.
Well, I'm talking about it from a customer's perspective, and
Oh, yeah.
you and I could probably do a whole episode on dealerships and franchise laws and the reason why car dealerships are the way they are in the United States. But that's an episode for another time.
Yeah, just speaking of the bosses, from a subordinate to boss standpoint, I actually really enjoyed working in the car dealership, but I can, from a customer's perspective, I can definitely see how that was frustrating.
Well, for something you're touching on, let's talk about. We know what makes a horrible boss. What makes a good boss? What makes somebody that you actually enjoy working for?
I enjoyed working for people who took an active interest in the fact that if I were charged with a job, they would help me do that job. They wouldn't try to get me to whitewash the fence. They wouldn't try to get me to do something extra. They would say, "Okay, this is your job. This is the description of your job. How are we going to make sure that you connect all the dots between A and B and do this job correctly and actually not make us regret signing your paycheck?" That kind of boss is the one, the person that leads you and the person that nurtures your skills and your knowledge of the industry where you work. That is a great boss. Somebody who doesn't make false promises or commitments that they can't keep to you. Also, another trademark of a great boss. You know, if they're willing to roll up their sleeves, like I said, I'm going to beat that term up. I might wear that one out. But if they're going to roll up their sleeves and go to work, right there with you in the trenches, that's a great boss to me.
Well, I'll tell you what makes a horrible boss to me, but also I can turn this and tell you what makes a good boss. If if you bring in somebody new to a company, corporation, what entity, what have you, and your method of training them is, okay, this is what we do, and they ask the question, why? And the only response you can come up with is, well, that's the way we've always done it. That is that right there. That makes or breaks somebody as a good boss or a horrible boss. Because if they're going to say that is the way we've always done it, and that's the end of the sentence, they're a shitty boss. If they say this
Agreed.
is the way we've always done it because we've tried this, and this, but we're always looking for new suggestions, do you have any? And is willing to actually entertain and listen and maybe find out. Maybe this person, from a fresh perspective, has the ability to streamline money. That's the concept. And every single job you've ever had, someone is trying to make money or save money. You may work someplace that is not revenue generating, but there's still a function for that within a company. Currently, I'm working in pseudo kind of a way of human resources. Now, my department does not generate revenue, but we prevent loss by preventing, disability claims and HR complaints and stuff of that nature, and just lost time. And I do all the investigations pertaining to that kind of those matters. So while I'm not revenue generating, I'm revenue saving. That is, no matter what job you're in, whether it's public service, sales, retail. I mean, it doesn't matter. You're there to either make money or save money. And that should always be their goal, not just to line their own pockets. Because if they're just there to collect a paycheck, they might as well be Joe Schmo that got hired off the street, and they're easily replaceable. If you're going to be a boss, you need to be somebody who actually takes ownership in what you're doing, and be willing to try to help the grease the machine. Because what a lot of people don't take into account is you'll have people that they destroy the company vehicles. They're losing tools or stealing them, breaking things of that nature, and the company must go through and replace those items, repair those items, buy new ones, what have you. And then these are the same people that at the end of the year they'll complain that they only got a 2% raise instead of a 5% raise that they're hoping to get. Well, they don't have the money anymore because they just spent it fixing all the crap that you broke. So you have bosses that you're just complacent with that, or ones that actually foster an environment where they're going to encourage their employees to do what they need to do to either make or save money for the company, which will in turn help everybody involved.
I agree with that too. I mean, that is definitely a good point, and one of the reasons why I'm glad that we discussed these things together, because you're that kind of employee. Whereas me, you know, I look at my job description, I match it and align it with the amount of money that I'm supposed to make, and I make it a cognizant decision. Yes, I can do this, and yes, I am willing to, or I'll go apply at the next place. You have always been the guy who looks at a situation and goes, how can we make this better? Whereas I am the kind of employee that gets hired to do a job, and that is the job that I do, and that's it. And it's not the best way, but it certainly isn't the worst either.
I mean, make no mistake, I do consider myself a mercenary. I'm not there because for the betterment of mankind. I am there to line my pockets and get out. But if you don't care about your position, and as a supervisor myself, if I don't ensure that we're not expending money and wasting money on employees that are not up to snuff, then there's that money's not going to be then the kitty to get my raise, to get more money, get my bonuses, get what I want. So there's a reason behind wanting wherever you're at to do good and do better. And I do consider myself, a mercenary. I am there because they're giving me money. You stop giving me money, I'm going to stop coming. But at the same time, where I'm at right now, we currently are going through a financial crisis. I'm working in government again, and we have, if you know anything about government, municipalities it cannot operate with a budget that's not balanced. You must have a balanced budget. And we've had to institute furloughs due to COVID-19 and all that nonsensical stuff that people got sent home. And then throughout the rest of the next 18 or 17 months, we're going to have one furlough day a month. And I am livid about it. I'm not happy about that one bit. But I see the necessity to do that so that we can continue to operate, even with constraints in our budgets.
Now, that being said, now I know you are in a very, I don't want to say prestigious, I don't have a better word for what I'm trying to say, a very important or critical role in your department, but I'm sure that you also have right now, as we currently speak, a boss that may or may not be doing what they're supposed to. And I know you don't want to talk about that, but going into similar industries where you've been in a similar supervisory role in some capacity, what have your bosses done to support you as a middle manager?
Well, I will talk about where I'm at right now. We discussed this before the podcast. We're going to intentionally leave out where we're at now. But since this is good, I'll go ahead and I'll throw it out there. My boss, who is one rung under the head honcho, she recognizes the fact that I know what I'm doing better than she does. The fact that she's overseeing multiple departments. My department is one cog on the wheel. She cannot be expected to be the person who knows everything about every department. She has to know enough, and she does not try to micromanage. She literally will let me be the supervisor I need to be and come to her if I have a problem. Now, don't get me wrong. She checks in. She does everything she needs to do. No complaints from me whatsoever. But what makes a good boss is actually allowing your subordinates to do what they're good at. And if they're not good at it, you replace them, or you teach them up and get them to where they need to be. But in this scenario, she recognizes that I have more expertise in the field that we're dealing with, and especially right now with this the pandemic. I'm coming from a healthcare field where I was a supervisor, and we are all of a sudden, faced with having to have a pandemic response. Well, it just so happens I've written these scenarios out and tabletop these into oblivion. I've done them before. I know what I'm doing with them. So the fact that they were able to tap that and allow me to put in a kind of a matrix form of leadership where, people that normally wouldn't answer to me are, because they recognize the fact that, hey, this person has expertise, and they allowed them to do that. And we got through it, and we're coming back to a more normal phase. And that's something that you need to be able to do, is recognize that you are not the all-knowing, the all-knowing enlightened Buddha. You are simply the person who's in charge right now. And there's always going to be somebody that has more expertise in a particular field, and you need to capitalize on that as a boss. Allow that person to excel. Just because they know more than you about this doesn't mean they know more about you about being a supervisor or about the field that you're working in. And I think a lot of people, as put in a position of authority, are afraid of that because they think this person's going to outshine them, or take their job, or end up surpassing them and being their boss. And I think you have to be really careful not to find yourself going to work every day living in fear of your subordinates.
I can agree with that, and it makes me reflect again back on that same boss that I had for the insurance company. Smarmy as he was, and as disingenuous as he would appear, he never had a problem playing to the strengths of those who worked for him. If we had a customer come in that he believed fit a certain profile, he wouldn't cherry pick his favorite advisor in the office to go do it. He would cherry pick the person that he believed would have the greatest success at writing business. And sometimes that was me. Sometimes it was, one of my coworkers or a senior advisor. But would you agree that playing to the strengths of your subordinates is a very, very key component in being an effective and good boss?
Absolutely. People always talk about, well, I'm not in human resources. If you're any kind of supervisor, you are a cog in the wheel that is human resources, because they're not supervising the people. You are. You need to utilize the strengths that you have. If you know someone is horrible at doing something, find what they're good at and assign them to that. You can't be afraid to move somebody around and find the more appropriate position for them, as opposed to just saying, this person's not worth my time and getting rid of them, which I've seen that many a times too, where somebody's, they have the capability of doing something, but that's not what, I don't want them to do that job. I want them to do this job. And, you can't judge you can't judge the ability of a fish by its, ability to climb a tree.
Right. No, that's a good point. You can't.
And I know I totally screwed up that analogy, but I think it still holds true. You can't, the test for which animal's best animal, by its ability to, who's the fastest. Well, no, you're finding out who's the fastest, not which animal's best animal.
Right.
So
right.
It's something that a lot of people, they fall into, that they're emulating bad bosses, and this is the way bad bosses have acted, or like I said, or they're just emulating what they've seen on television. Television is is the most horrible thing in our society, and you'll hear that from me over and over again. Your best bet is to get rid of the television, listen to podcasts like the social liability podcast, and your life will be increasingly better.
It really will be. I mean, those no truer words have been spoken on this podcast yet.
That and just don't put up with people's bullshit.
That is something that I think we're going to wear out too. I think that we're going to be touching base on that not just in this episode, but in just about every other one. You know.
Without a doubt.
But so we've established some of the crappy bosses we've both had. Certainly not all of them, but I mean we only have a finite amount of time in order to put this production on. So
Well, I've told you about my boss right now. I mean, I think she's. I'm not gonna, you know, rain sunshine out over, but I will say I have no complaints. What is the
right.
best boss you've ever had?
Oh man, the best boss I ever had was the guy who hired me to sell cars. That man, I don't think I I don't think I could ever utter a bad word about that man. He was so nervous when I walked into his store on my
Walked.
forearm crutches.
So you walked in?
Yeah, yeah, that's back when I could walk. That's back when I could walk. And I had my forearm crutches, and he asked me outright. He goes, "Do you really think that you can do this?" And I went, "I've got a family to feed. I can do just about anything under those circumstances. You tell me what I got to do, and I'm gonna do it." And I knew nothing about selling a car. I knew nothing. Like, I knew where the driver's door was. And that man, and I told him that too. But for some reason, he just believed in me. And I ended up working for that company for just under 2 years. Like, literally, like a month away from 2 years. And because he actually brought me in there against everything that he personally believed about the handicapped, he brought me in, and I ended up getting promoted not once but twice in 2 years. Um, and it was thanks to him.
Well, why don't you brag about it?
Well, I just did. I don't have a lot to look forward to in life anymore. That's my heyday moment.
Nice, nice indeed. But so I'm hoping that if somebody listens to this, you recognize that you are not the only one out there with a shitty boss, or you realize that you might be a shitty boss and you need to be better, or you shouldn't be afraid to tell your boss that they're a piece of crap.
I agree. I agree, and that's kind of a good segue into what exactly can you do about a crappy boss, and I think those are some really good strong bullet points that you just brought up there, because commiserating and bitching about having a crappy boss is one thing, but let's get to the meat and potatoes and put some sizzle on this steak and tell people how to deal with it.
All right. Well, how do you deal with it?
I take whatever bullshit comes along and just hope my paycheck comes into the bank. But that's me.
Here's the thing: you're never, almost never, going to be able to do much about the boss. They're gonna be the one that signs their own death warrant eventually with whatever company once somebody else realizes that this person's not generating or saving me money. And that's comes down to it. That's when people getting rid of, is when they're no longer a benefit, or they may realize they're a detriment, but their benefits are no longer outweighing the detriment it is to keep them around. So
Right.
going to HR, doing all that stuff, that just saves your butt when it comes down to civil liability or civil proceedings that may take place later. But in most states, in the United States, for example, are at will states, which means as long as they don't really give you a reason, they can just get rid of your butt and say, because you're ugly. It doesn't matter as long as they don't give you a reason. And then, you have protected statuses and yada, yada, yada. But the best advice I can give to anybody, especially younger people, don't make a horse's ass out of yourself because your boss is a jerk. Because what's going to, especially younger people, and let's just face reality, but we know people that are older than us that have still fallen victim to this. They allow their emotions to get to the best of them, and they just, arbitrarily quit showing up, or they go out in epic style. Whether, and you'll see, I love watching some of the videos on YouTube of people quitting their jobs in epic ways, but it's not something I'd recommend because there's a couple things you're going to be wrong with this. One, what is one of the questions you're asked in every single job interview you've ever had?
Why did you leave your last job?
Indeed. And so, and how do you answer that? Well, if you start answering anything to the negative, well, my boss was a dickhead and he didn't know what he was doing. Well, that means you're a negative person. I don't want you around, so I'm not going to hire you. You know,
Right.
you can't go in there and start, slinging mud. So my advice to anybody is don't leave. Suck it up, Buttercup. I mean, the times of telling everybody you can be everything you want to be, and everybody deserves respect. Yeah, that may be true, but I'm not going to be teaching a horse how to fly the space shuttle anytime soon.
Right. And, a lot of people start pounding and griping on the human resources training. Well, I'll just go to HR. I'll go to HR. The one big myth about human resources that I have found, and again, I've not worked in human resources. This is just from my own personal observation. But human resources is not there to protect the employee. They're there to protect the interests of the company. So if you go harping about your boss to human resources and you keep on riding that pony, you might not like the stable it ends up in, because human resources is going to start going on a fire sale and going, who is truly the risk to the operation? Not, I don't want to sit here and say that they don't care that you're being done wrong, but at the end of the day, you can't round up the truth. And like you said earlier, they're going to look at the books. They're going to look at the books. Whoever this guy is that's causing you problems, if he's producing for that company, if he's making that company money, and he doesn't have a lot of complaints, I can tell you right now, human resources is going to have their eyes set on you as the problem, and they're going to get rid of you
Well,
as the problem.
and the other myth is human resources will get rid of them. No, human resources can't hire or fire anybody. That's
Nope.
not what their job is. They make recommendations, but they're not the ones that actually do it.
Exactly.
But when you're dealing with a new company, you're still going to go through human resources, and they're going to give that recommendation whether you should be hired or not. And if you really want out of someplace, yeah, get the heck out of it. You don't spend your life being unhappy and miserable. You end up growing gray early, or it just and you have shorter lifespan, and depression, anxiety, you name it. But you do need to get out of there. But work on your resume, and it doesn't matter if you're working at McDonald's on the fry later. You were a starch technician for a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
Embellish, but get your butt out of there. But leave, give 2 weeks notice. Do everything proper. That way you're not burning bridges and you're not leaving a bad taste in your mouth. Because guess what? People do talk. When anytime somebody applies for a job, anymore, it's never a one-on-one. They're typically panel interviews or multiple interviews. And
Right.
you'd be shocked how often you find somebody who mutually in common. I've moved across the country and I've known people that, hey, you know this person? Well, I know their cousin, and guess what? With the advent of social media, there is no secrets anymore.
No,
It,
sir.
as soon as that that goes out on that spider web, and that's why I don't really, with my personal social media, I don't really do a whole heck of a lot. And I don't mind getting rid of people in my life because I don't really need that information circulating. And anytime you leave a job, if you make that epic, have the marching band come through to announce that you're done, uh, people are going to know, and it's not going to help you later in life.
No, no, it will not. And you know what? Normally, and I'll tell you, some of the first people that my new jobs have called to ask about how I am a worker are my crappy bosses from the company that I just left. And thank goodness you never burn a bridge, like you said. You gotta sometimes you just gotta chalk it up as it really is just what it is. I mean, like, it's crap, and you've tried, and now you're leaving. There's no reason to be vindictive, because if you really burn that bridge with that crappy boss, you might find it very difficult later to get yourself gainful employment in a similar industry, or any company for that matter. You
Oh
know,
yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I left law enforcement, and I went into doing what I do now with mitigation. Let's just call it that. And I end up working for a healthcare company. All of a sudden, I was running into people that oh, this person worked at that prison. Oh, okay. Well, that person knew this person. Well, now, it's like a spider web. You'd be shocked, and then of course one of them will, and it eventually will send you a friend request on Facebook, which you never accept. But you look at the mutual friends. It's like, oh my God, this guy knows 30 people that I used to work with.
I accept every single friend request I get from a former coworker or boss that I've had on Facebook. And just full disclosure, I,
You-
I really do. Just because.
if you're that bored, call me, man. Don't do.
Well, it's just you know what? Sometimes it's like being in a car wreck. Turning your head doesn't make it hurt any less. You might as well know what the bastard's up to.
Uh, you're like an old woman that we're looking out her window with binoculars.
I don't have binoculars,
You also don't have
but
much of a window.
everything else is pretty accurate. No, I have a wonderful window.
Yeah, you can
Oh,
watch trash burn.
I smell it. Thank you. I don't watch it. And actually, that's happening right now.
You should just pee out the window.
That's very, very, very doable for me because I actually have a suprapubic catheter now. My bladder is a bag. All
Wait,
I got to do is stick it out the window and open the nozzle, and you're done.
you can just put it in a squirt gun. Remember?
That audible silence, that melodramatic, appropriate pause was me connecting two dots in my mind. Thank you. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, leaving people with that visual, I think it's a good place to leave off. Um, we want to again thank everybody for the great positive responses we got from the pilot episode. I hope you enjoyed episode 1. We're going to try to do this on the regular basis. We got some ideas for other episodes coming up, but if you want to hear something that we are bitch moaning and complaining about, please get in contact with us or leave a comment wherever you're seeing this video or listening to this audio version, because we are going to be available on most podcasting platforms in the very near future. And I hope you all enjoyed this in some way, shape, or form. So, you got anything else for us there, Bucky?
You know what? I really don't, other than the fact that, I just hope that this reaches one person and makes their day. I mean, that's really what I'm in it for, man. I just want to see people smile. The world's a messed up place right now, and it really doesn't have to be as bad as everybody makes it out to be. Let's just all, again, roll up our sleeves and do the work together, man. Let's make the world a better place, one day at a time.
Well, let's just be honest here. The kind of person that's going to be, find enjoyment listening to two middle-aged guys bitch bone and complain is going to be a special breed of people. So if you're in that special breed, congratulations, and we look forward to you listening to our next episode here on the Social Liability Podcast. Thanks.